Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Once again, PGA Tour is here. Decent golfers are here. I'm so excited. I'm glad that we're back. It feels like it's been ages. It's probably only been 2 or 3 weeks. Spence, how you doing, mate? Merry Christmas.
Yeah, happy holidays to everybody out there also. We were talking off air. This is a very fun time to get things back and running again. We, get a month off of golf, at least for me personally. I know you covered the DP World Tour. I was like 10 days into it and was ready to roll again. So very excited to be doing this show in classic, I guess, Joel fashion on this. He's decided to WD himself from the first episode, which is a marginal change from his players being WD'd, but it's just going to be the two of us today. Things will be back to normal again next week, but excited to see everybody in the chat.
Yeah, look, and not a bad tournament only to roll with 3 of us. Obviously, reduced field here at the Sentry. We get all of the top guys back, which is great. As you said, I only managed about a 10-day break from the golf because the DP World Tour just carries on. The season finishes one day, and then 4 days later, they're starting the new season in Australia again, and they're right back into it, which in some ways is great, but I've really enjoyed having sort of 9-10 days off from work and the golf and raring to go and get back into it. And for those on the PGA Tour, a bit of time to really shake off the cobwebs. And I really want to start there, Spence. With this tournament, it can be a little bit difficult because some of these guys we've not seen since October and November. How do you go about ranking these guys who might have only played one professional tournament since the end of the Tour Championship?
I reduced what I looked at for current form. There's a specific way that I build my model, and it deviates from week to week from how much of it becomes a statistical perspective, how much of it is a current form, how much of it is course history. The current form ended up being cut in about by half of what it usually is, which puts this really big difference in a model when you're building it. And the funny thing about it, David, is you talk about players that are not necessarily even active, whether it's because they haven't played since October, or it's because that they haven't played in a professional golf tournament in a couple months here. 125 of 135 golfers that have played this tournament over the last 3 years have been 10 under par or better. You get this extremely easy golf course. This is resort style golf. And when we talk about the course, I'll get a little bit more into it in a second, because it's a funny, unique layout of what we have here. You have this wide open nature that's going to hit front and center with it. But for it being a birdie style course, there's a little bit more scrambling and some of those 3-putt avoidance numbers just because of these gargantuan greens that come into play. So you're not going to be challenged by anything that's out of the norm. We've seen the winners get into minus 30 in some of these iterations. But that's my biggest takeaway of this course, even before we talk about it a little bit more over the next couple of minutes, is just that this is easy golf. This is dip your feet back in the water. Let's get back rolling. And then, next week at the Sony, you don't necessarily get a difficult iteration of it, but it's a little bit more challenging than what we're going to get this week.
Yeah, look, it is one of those difficulties, right? We never know exactly how much practice those players have been getting in. We've obviously got a bit of news about Victor Hovland has split from his coach, Joe Mayo, once again, is apparently playing through a broken toe as well. So some interesting connotations for one of the top names in the tournament there. But, other than sort of like smatterings of news and rumors that we hear, it's really difficult to actually judge who's been putting the work in the off season, who's just coming in here rusty as hell, hasn't touched a golf club in a month, and is just really using this as a warm-up, as a nice kind of lull after the Christmas festive season, coming back in and kind of starting to get back into it. And then who's going out here to really make a mark and compete and really has put all their effort into preparing for this tournament. So I've got some interesting names, I guess, I want to have a look at. But as always, Spence, you've got one of the best course breakdowns in the business. You kind of touched on the Plantation course at Kapalua a little bit. I've got some thoughts on it as well, but I'd love to hear what you make in this course breakdown.
Yeah, I talked about the ease of the facility. Essentially, that comes from these slow Bermuda green complexes and then the wide open fairways that are going to be pronounced from the second that you step onto the grounds. I talked about this a second ago. It's a little bit different than most birdie making facilities just because of the reason that 3-putt avoidance comes into play here a little bit more because of the large green complexes, but you're essentially looking at this facility where there's 11% increase in driving accuracy, and then this 10-yard uptick that's going to take place for driving distance. You add those two factors together, you get this uptick from 65% GIR percentage to 79%. It's going to yield one of the highest percentages on tour all season. Part of that comes from the large green complexes. A lot of that comes from just the lack of rough that you can find out in this place. It doesn't mean necessarily that distance is the only factor. I think it goes a lot further than that. I'm a little bit more intrigued about how players increase their projection when you give them easy fairways, limited rough over that basic answer of expecting length. But short irons are going to play a factor. You get nearly 20% of shots that come from within 100 yards. And then just that scrambling that I talked about, it's been a very even split since 2002 to where half the players that have won have been Americans, half the players that have won have been non-Americans. It kind of goes to show that there are a lot of game types that can find success out here. The one thing that has been very evident, though, from the winner, and this is most weeks, but even maybe more so here than a lot of tournaments, you need a spike putter to get the 30 under par to win. So, strokes gained putting on similar Bermuda green complexes, whether that's slow green complexes, easy putting, a lot of that is what I built into my model this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we know this is a birdie fest. We know that you're going to have to go low. You know you've got to be making fours on the majority of those par fives and the odd eagle as well to really be competitive here. Disproportionate number of shots under 100 yards at this facility as well. Do see a lot of wedges come into play at this tournament. As you mentioned, plenty of wide range off the tee as well. So you can kind of get the ball down there, and accuracy doesn't necessarily play so much of a factor, but it really does come down to getting that hot putter. Your around the green game is actually pretty significant here as well. If you can get on those big green complexes, if you do miss the green or you end up in the bunkers, getting up and down is really important because you just cannot afford to be making any bogeys at this golf course whatsoever. And then in terms of correlation to other golf courses, I mean, one of the reasons I love this tournament so much is because this has been such a good guide to the Masters. The winners who have played well on these greens, the greens over in Kapalua, have tended to do really well at Augusta National. There's lots of correlation there, so it can be a really good guide to early futures markets towards the Masters. Who's going to play well there? That correlation, I think, mainly comes from the fact you get all these approach shots where the ball's either above or below your feet. It's a very undulating property. Lots of different approach shots that you're going to need to hit, which is very similar to what you do at Augusta National as well. Plenty of room off the tee at both the courses as well. So even though on paper it might not look like those two courses correlate to each other, the leaderboards just speak so strongly of that correlation between the two. And then the other one as well is Riviera and the Genesis Invitational as well, which obviously also is a great form guide to the Masters and Augusta National. Those three courses seem to be intrinsically linked in terms of players who have played well across all of those different tournaments. And we're not just talking about the big players, but some of those minor players further down the board have found success at those courses as well. So with that being said, we'll begin the first draft of the year. Now, for those who are new and might be jumping in for the first time, the way this works is a standard snake draft. We use DraftKings salary here. We are going to live draft teams against each other, but you as the audience get to draft a team as well. The way that works is if you want to nominate a golfer, put a name of golf down that you want to draft for team audience. The first player that gets a second nomination will be nominated to team audience. If you guys don't get your nominations in time, you know what happens. We start dictating terms and we'll start picking players for you. So if you don't want to get Peter Malnati in your team, get your nominations in plenty of time so we don't have to pick for you with various results. Certainly if Joel's here, we know that can go all sorts of ways. It can get pretty hectic. So that's the way it works. I'll bring up the draft board. The draft order tonight, I have got the first pick followed by Spencer, and then team audience, you will be on the wraparound going back to back. And I am going to start the new PGA Tour season with some controversy because I know that Spencer is going to want to play this player. He jokingly threw this name in. I probably don't need to take him with the first pick, but I know that Spencer's going to want him on his team at some point, and that's Jason Day. I think that Jason Day is excellent value this week at 7,600. Look, he's had the opportunity to play this tournament on 6 different occasions. He's never finished worse than 13th when playing on this course. Most recently, last year, he finished 10th here. He's also got that correlated form at the Genesis. Last 2 years, he's quietly finished 9th in both editions in 2023 and 2024 at Riviera. And he's got good form at the Masters as well. I mean, he's had a 2nd, a 3rd, a 5th, a 10th across his career at Augusta National. So he hits all of those correlated courses. The course form at the Sentry, you cannot deny. He's one of the best putters in the field. He's one of the best around the green, and he does experience a spike in terms of his approach metrics when he gets under 100 yards. So I think he's great value at 7,600. As I said, I'm going to controversially take on the first pick here rather than going to the top of the board and make sure that Spence doesn't get him. So Spence, any thoughts on the fact that I've probably just stolen Jason Day from you, and who will be your first pick off the board?
Well, I mean, it's an old relationship with Jason Day, and we move into my pick, and I feel like it wouldn't be a proper PGA Draftcast if I didn't take Wyndham Clark. As everybody's well aware of, Wyndham Clark has replaced Jason Day as my boy. And, you know, one of the things that you mentioned before I actually get into the Wyndham Clark selection is I want to talk about Jason Day very quickly, because I love the point that you brought up before we even got into any of this, talking about the ability to prevent bogeys from being made and the ability to spike with the putter. Those are the two statistics. Around the green play matters this week. There is a big uptick inside of my model that I used when looking at that. And I tweeted it out earlier today. You can go and see the 10 players that were the biggest upside climbers when looking at the spike putting ability and the around the green metric. Xander Schauffele, number 1. Number 2 was Jason Day in that category. I think there's a reason why Day has found success in the past at this venue. And there's a reason why David's talked about for why Day has also found success throughout his career at this course. So I do agree with you. 7,600 is a very good price for a golfer that fits the profile that I'm looking for of past winners at this tournament. Now, I'm going to take a golfer here in Wyndham Clark that has not necessarily performed in Hawaii throughout his career. I put it in my model. There's only 2 tournaments to pull from. He's 47th in this field when it comes in strokes gained Hawaii. But I think there's a couple interesting notes to that because, one, it's a 2019 missed cut at the Sony, a course that is not quite similar to what this one's going to be. Got to be a lot more accurate off the tee there. And then you also have last year's 29th at the Sentry that he provided. But this, for me, when I ran my model, was an event where if you look last season, that 29th place finish is going to look extremely poor on paper. He got to 19 under par. Golf is full of small margins that come into play. A birdie here, a birdie there, and all of a sudden he catapults himself up what the leaderboard ends up being with it. So I think this is a spot where Clark's upside is being a little bit ignored in both the outright market and here for DFS. We know him as of last year to be a boomer bust commodity, but I think that upside here in a no-cut tournament is exactly what I am trying to shoot for when a lot of these builds are going to look very similar on paper.
Yeah, look, I think Wyndham Clark's actually a really interesting name. As you said, Wyndham Clark in 2024 was really feast or famine. We saw him having second-place finishes in a number of signature events, most notably probably the Players and the Arnold Palmer Invitational. When you look into that 29th as well, it was pretty indifferent across the board other than he finished with a 63 in round 4. So he did manage to unlock the secret of the Plantation course in Kapalua in that final round. The other interesting metric I note for Wyndham Clark as well is from 50 to 100 yards in terms of those wedge metrics, which you do see a disproportional number of shots at this golf course. He ranked second in this field in strokes gained from that approach range over the last 12 months. So interesting name there, and one that I can definitely get on board with. Audience super quick. I mean, the audience had put in their picks even before you took Wyndham Clark, and I thought we could end up with some controversy to start the season with Colin Morikawa being stolen from them, but they've gone with Colin Morikawa, Akshay Bhatia as their first 2 selections. Colin Morikawa undoubtedly has the best course history at this golf course. It's pretty undeniable, his affinity to playing in Hawaii, and completely understandable there, obviously. And then Akshay Bhatia, obviously, if we're talking about upside, someone who can get red hot someone who can absolutely spike with the putter. We all know what Bhatia can do, as well as the fact that Akshay Bhatia on tropical golf courses has an incredible history. He really just tends to shine when he gets on these slower greens. He gets into those tropical environments. You go look at any of the other courses in Punta Cana or down in Puerto Rico, in Mexico, Akshay Bhatia tends to show up. So it's a couple of interesting names from the audience, and a couple of names that I can definitely get on board with. Spence, what do you say on Morikawa and Bhatia? And then you will be on the clock for your second selection.
I wrote about this earlier today. Morikawa was one of the names that, if you look on DraftKings and inside the betting market, he was I don't want to say a late addition, because he was not a late addition. He was a late addition to pricing. He was a name that DraftKings initially missed on the slate. And the question that I posed in my article is, what does that end up doing for ownership? I don't think it's much, because most people on Sunday that looked at that, these are your hardcore gamers that are going to be aware of that. But what it did end up doing, and maybe you can credit a little bit of this to DataGolf, of them saying that Morikawa should have been inside the 20-1 range. Maybe it's a little bit of him being a late addition into the field in a different capacity with it. We've seen that number in the outright market drift, and that was one of the first outright tickets that I actually placed. It got up as high as 14-1 at some locations. You know, there's the concern that David talked about of how do we know where everybody's at? And if you're going to lay a 14-1 price on a guy who hasn't won a golf tournament since, or only has won one golf tournament, I should say, since 2021, there's going to be concerns of going down that narrative. But like David mentioned it, one of the best course histories that you're going to find this week, a golfer that is going to pinpoint, be accurate in all the categories that I'm looking for. I talked about Wyndham Clark having that upside metric. There was not a golfer for me that graded inside of the top 10 in as many categories as what Colin Morikawa did. On the flip side of that answer with Bhatia, I expect him to be very popular. I think he probably goes off the board as one of the chalkier selections. And I mean, you can even see with like the Morikawa thing, like I'm going to have to go in and hand update it, because when I originally built my model, he doesn't even have a price tag on the thing right now. But as far as Bhatia is concerned, one of the things that I ran, and you can find this over in the article that I posted today, is I tried to look for this event for similar profiles of golfers that have won this tournament in the past. So essentially what I did is I took metrics that had been done over the last 10 years, and I tried to figure out what golfer fit that to the tee the most of all the names that we're looking at. And one of the big upside climbers ended up being Akshay Bhatia there. I think there's a reason why, beyond all the obvious choices of why Bhatia has been a very popular name, easy birdie course for him to be able to use a lot of those advantages. I think it's a savvy start from the audience with Morikawa and Bhatia. Don't have a problem with either selection there.
Yeah, look, I mean, Colin Morikawa, obviously, as I said, great course history. My concern comes with the around the green can get a bit touch and go with Colin Morikawa. We've seen that over the last few years, as has the putter, but he seems to do better on these greens, right? And the Bhatia one's interesting. I will be really interested to see what the ownership comes out at. Stephen at Win Daily Sports over at our website does some of the best predictions in terms of ownership that you'll see in the market, as well as the Frisky Biscuit continuing cashing, delivering absolute prime value down in the 6K range. So I think that he's a really, really interesting name to be looking at. I'd be interested to see what his ownership is, just given some of the names around him. I mean, look, you got Wyndham Clark, who's even cheaper than Akshay Bhatia, and I would argue that Wyndham Clark is, at the moment, a better golfer than Akshay is. So it'd be interesting to see how those numbers all shape out in the end. But Spence, you are on the clock with your second pick. Where are we going to go and look with pick number 2?
I guess I'm going to go down this direction of the all non-Hawaii team, it feels like, to start. This is a golfer that, if you look at him 10 years ago in his career, this was a player that in Hawaii always seemed to find success. And if you look over the last 24 to 50 rounds inside of Hawaii, which ends up being a pretty relatively long time frame of what we're looking at, since there's only a couple events a year that are going to be in there, this has not been a golfer that has necessarily found a ton of success. But I'm going to take Adam Scott at 8,100. Number one putter for me inside of my model in strokes gained putting on similar green complexes. I've already talked about trying to find that profile and trying to find that golfer that fits the mold. Adam Scott is inside of the top 5 of my model in that area. He's inside of the top 5 of my model in strokes gained total and wind. You always get a little bit of a blustery condition that ends up occurring in Hawaii. inside of the top 10 of my model when you take distance, the proximity from proximity under 100 yards that we keep talking about, add that into around the green play. And then at easy scoring courses, he's 6th in my sheet. So, I understand that we maybe necessarily haven't gotten all that upside from him recently, but this is a golfer that closed the season in a very strong sense. The time off, you could make an argument that maybe he's missed his window. If this could have happened a month ago, this might be the prime Adam Scott spot. But I think with the old age has come a little bit more of hope that he knows he needs to start a season hotter than he has in years past. And my hope is that we see that from him this week.
Yeah, look, I really like the call on Adam Scott there. I think that it's a really solid selection. As you said, he finished the season just in superb form, 2nd at the BMW Championship, 3rd at the Tour Championship, 4th at the Tour Championship, to finish the FedEx Cup playoffs. And then on the DP World Tour, he finished 3rd at the DP World Tour Championship. Another wide open, hot tropical course, tends to be slightly slower greens and tends to be good scoring, plenty of space off the tee at that golf course at the Jumeirah Golf Estates in Dubai as well. And one of the strongest field of the DP World Tour being their season-ending championship. So finishing 3rd there behind Rory McIlroy only sort of 5-6 weeks ago was tending to look pretty promising. Obviously, he's got the correlation to Augusta National, being a previous Masters champion. He's also won twice at Riviera before, and then continues that correlation at Plantation Course, where he had a 7th, 5th, 2nd, and a 6th across the years. As you said, some of that form is 10 plus years ago, but does show that he has on different opportunities managed to do very, very well here. So I think he's a really intriguing name and fully endorse that selection. I'm going to go at the top of the board with a really chalky play, but I think it's fully justified. And that's Justin Thomas, who is 9,700 on DraftKings, but priced as 2nd favorite in the betting market. He's only 10 to 1 at some books. Yes, that's double the price of Xander Schauffele in terms of the betting odds, but you're getting a big discount on his salary compared to the other guys who are priced up above him. And Justin Thomas is obviously a multiple winner at this golf course. We started to see him unlock Augusta National as of late as well, and he has played very well at Riviera too, where he's finished 2nd before previously. And look, the course form, if you're looking at Colin Morikawa, is probably number 1, but this guy's won twice at this golf course before, as well as a couple of thirds. So Justin Thomas for me is a really interesting name, one that I'm going to base a lot of my teams around. Probably going to make my DFS call for this week, and I think that he's an interesting one as well to look at. I mentioned in Win Daily probably about 2 months ago, that was my first futures bet on the Masters, was Justin Thomas at 50 to 1 to win at Augusta National. You were extremely lucky if you're finding 30s or 35s out there, because it does look like he's turned a corner, and I think that he has all of the ability to actually play well and potentially win and slip on a green jacket at some point in his career. So Justin Thomas for me with the first selection. And look, you took Adam Scott, and the other thing I mentioned about Adam Scott, if Wyndham Clark was 2nd from 50 to 100, Adam Scott is 3rd from 50 to 100 yards on approach, and I'm going to take the number 1 place golfer within that range, and that's Hideki Matsuyama. Obviously, continue that correlation between Augusta National winning the Masters last year, won at Riviera as well. He's got a good record at this golf course, excellent between that key approach range that I mentioned with his wedges, and a golfer who can absolutely stripe it, especially with his ball striking. A player who is not afraid to go very, very low as well. So Hideki Matsuyama to round up my selection there. So Spence, your thoughts on JT and Hideki Matsuyama, and then you will be on the clock with your 3rd pick.
I think there's an argument to be made that Justin Thomas, regardless of what the ownership ends up being, every bit of it is warranted here. I tweeted this out like right when I got back from my hiatus that I had during the off season. And one of the first things I did is I tried to dive into the metrics of just the very end of the year. We always talk, or I should say, I always talk on this show. Everybody knows I run my data from a longer term perspective than practically anybody in this space. Like, I infuse a lot of the short term stuff into it, but a lot of the core of what you see is a little bit longer than most people. And when I shortened the time frame for Justin Thomas, it was astounding. The leaps and bounds and climbing that he did in my sheet compared to every other player. We saw it from a return with the results that he had. You also see it even within my model this week. He's the number 1 player that I have in my sheet for safety. He's inside of the top 3 in my sheet for overall win equity. That's also what the market is going to tell you. But you add those two things together, that provides this really strong outlook of a golfer that if I'm going to take a chalky selection, it better be a golfer that blends together both the upside and the safety return. So I love the Justin Thomas play. There's an argument to be made that if we were going back to do this, like he could have been the 101 off the board. And I don't think, and I'm not even just saying for this draft. I'm saying as far as like, just take the 101 off the board of who you think is going to win the golf tournament. Not necessarily an outright ticket that I have just because of where the odds were. But I think when you look at the market and the way that he's moving, there's a reason why he's as strong here as he is. There's also a reason why he's consistently performed. So I really like the Justin Thomas pick. I'm going to move it into my next selection, David. You kind of put me in this bind right now because I was hoping Thomas was going to fall to me. That was kind of the way I wanted to plan to build this, is two $8,000 golfers, go up and get Justin Thomas, figure out a build from there. Morikawa being on would have been another really easy spot for me. Unfortunately, audience in a good spot of taking him. Could go all the way up and get Xander. Don't think I'm going to do that right now, though. I am going to take, and you could make an argument, David, that maybe I don't even need to do this because I don't think he's going to be very popular, but I'm going to take Sam Burns. And this is continuing this trend that I've put together of golfers that if you just run it straight from strokes gained in Hawaii are not going to check any of the boxes of what you're looking for. But I made this argument at the end of 2024. I know that if you look at the space and you ask people, who is the golfer that is the most underrated name? For a really long time, that answer was Russell Henley. And then we've talked about it on this show, David. All of a sudden, DataGolf put out that Russell Henley is a top X player in the world. And you heard that take over and over and over again. And I think it's been done to such an extent right now that we can no longer say Russell Henley's the most underrated player. That can't be the consensus answer if that's what the actual underrated player is. I would make an argument that the most underrated player is now Sam Burns. This is a golfer that has not necessarily, up until last year, popped in any of the majors. We saw him finally put some of the pieces together here and there in a few of those events. Most notably, the Open didn't end up putting it together quite correctly on Sunday there. But you want to talk about a golfer that has that ability to spike with the flat stick, spike on similar green complexes, have the distance, have the prerequisites that you're looking for. There's a lot to like about him here. And this might end up being the year of Sam Burns, in my opinion, to where we look back 12 months from now and go, yeah, Sam Burns is a legitimate top, whatever the number is that we want to say in the world. And he did it because of X, Y, and Z of him winning multiple times in the year. Maybe with one of those being a notable event. You win a Tournament of Champions sort of an event here. I know that's not what it technically is anymore. That's a notable win. And I do think that that's something that Sam Burns is capable of putting together.
Yeah, look, I think another really sneaky name, and I mean, I'm really interested. I think that Spence at the moment is building one of the perfect, like, large GPP lineups that you could have, names that are probably going to go a little bit under the radar, but you can see the legitimate upside behind the selections. I mean, Sam Burns within this field over the last 6 months is the second best putter. Jason Day is third in that metric over the last 6 months. But then over the last 12 months, just in strokes gained total, like pure who has been beating the best golfers, Sam Burns is 6th in this field, and he's kind of priced right down there at the bottom of the 9K range. I don't think he's going to be a very popular name, but I can certainly see the upside appeal, and I think he's a super sneaky, interesting prospect for this event. So very nice selection there with his correlation to Genesis as well. He's had a 3rd and a 10th at that golf course in Riviera too. So audience, you are back on the clock. I think that we've just got a second for Pendrith. We've got Albert and Zach there, both on Taylor Pendrith, and we'll await their second selection. So we're going to need some names, audience, for you guys to nominate a player. But Spence, you want to kick off with some analysis of Taylor Pendrith while we wait for the audience to nominate another golfer?
Sure. We've talked about this quite a bit so far this show of it, and I think when you have a tournament at a course over and over again, a lot of the metrics are going to be very easily recyclable, I guess. Like, we're going to be able to look at this, figure out what the course is going to entail, and kind of go from there. Pendrith was a name for me that you put him on an easy course, you allow him the ability to, specifically on like birdiers or better gained on easy courses. That was the real category where he started to pop inside the top 5 for me. Weighted birdie or better percentage releases the same thing, but you take that distance that he adds to the mix. we can talk all we want about his lack of proximity play. When I just ran this from an overall outlook of proximity, he's 43rd overall over the last year in proximity. He's 46th in proximity in a lot of the other metrics. But the one area of his game where he does find a little bit more success, and the best area of his game happens to come from within 100 yards. So there is this very specific blueprint that comes into the mix of hit the ball far, be able to hit your short irons at an uptick of what you normally do, and then make some putts. And that's how you can find high-end success at this sort of a tournament. So Pendrith popped in a lot of different ways for me this week. I thought 7,500 was a cheap price tag to wager on that upside.
Yeah, look, I think he's really interesting. Obviously, we saw a bit of a tail off it towards the end of the season in terms of what Taylor Pendrith was doing in terms of his output. But as you said, distance is not a problem for this guy. He sees an uptick once he gets within 100 yards in terms of performance, and he could be a really good putter as well. So interesting name. I'll see how he goes. I don't think he's necessarily going to be one of the highest owned, but he does display as a positive value for me in terms of expected output compared to his current DK salary. At the moment, Spence, we have just 3 nominated from the audience, it looks like. 4. So we've got Aaron Rye, Nico Echeverria, Siwoo Kim, Grazeman. Double down on the Grazeman. We just had it locked in. Max Grazeman is the audience 4th selection. What's your thoughts on Grazeman? Because obviously we saw him towards the end of this year. Really, arguably play as one of the best golfers in the world over the last kind of 3 months. He played 6 tournaments, and in 4 of them he finished 4th or better, including 3 runner-up finishes. One of those definitely should have been a victory, where he threw it away at the Zozo, I believe, where he should have definitely gone out and won the tournament. But he's been playing some good golf if you put recent form into any of your metrics.
I'm borderline indifferent to him. So I've talked about this on the show before. I'll bring it up very quickly. One of the things I like to run is looking for better than and worse than expected form on a specific course versus the recent metrics that we've gotten from them. I think that's a really good indicator of trying to find a golfer that may be able to overperform from what we've seen recently, and also a golfer that may underperform that could potentially have gotten courses that fit them ever so slightly better. I don't necessarily have a massive take on Grazeman one way or another. It's probably going to be popular when you put him down at 8,000 with the recent results that we've gotten. I do lean in the direction of I am lower than him on consensus because he was the 369, the 10th biggest faller that I had in worst expected weighted form versus recent form. And I don't think that's like necessarily an overly alarming mark when you perform as one of the best players in the world. A slight drop off is bound to occur at any course that you're really going to look at it. But I guess that's my only concern with it, is just that I think he's going to be popular at the end of the day, and you're going to have to make a decision on if you're okay playing that popularity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of people will see his recent form numbers and just gravitate towards that name as a result. But we know that he's got plenty of driving distance, and we know he can putt really, really well. He's one of the best putters in this field, especially over the last 3 months. He has been incredibly hot with the putters. So interesting name that definitely possesses upside. If it was me personally, I'd spend the extra $100 and go to Adam Scott in that spot. But I can definitely see the appeal that Max Grazeman has there. Spence, you are on the clock with your 4th selection, and then I've got 2 coming up.
Jason Day, Taylor Pendrith, those would have been 2 options I would have considered if it would have gotten back to me at any point. I'm going to stay in that general salary range, though, to just open things up for myself as much as I can down the stretch here. I'm going to take Keegan Bradley at 7,500. I've talked a lot during this show about trying to find a profile that most resembles golfers that have found success here in the past. And Bradley was one of those. I ran it for win profiles, top 5 profiles, 10 and 20 into the mix. And Bradley was one of those names that across the board most closely resembled of a golfer that has won this tournament of almost anybody. You look at the short iron proximity that he brings to the mix. You look at his ability to just scramble in general on similar properties. 3rd in my sheet in extra proximity when I looked at the short iron proximity added to the mix there. Number 2, as I talked about, in proximity within 100 yards. Also, just across the board, like if you're looking for general safety of a golfer, like the best way I would describe it is you start finding more upside for a golfer when you start removing some of the off the tee stuff and adding in the things like putting around the green. When you're looking for a profile that's a little bit safer, a lot of that off the tee stuff started to become more important. And Bradley had the safety in his profile with his off the tee game. He was inside the top 20 at similar comp courses of everything that I looked at. And then when you want to find the upside and where does the upside actually occur, where it occurred for me, and I understand that you can say that there's concerns with the putter. He's 43rd in my model. He does jump inside of the top 30 inside of my sheet when strokes gained putting on Bermuda and strokes gained putting on easy courses. So there is enough that I have seen from him on similar green complexes to believe that there's a spike ability from him because of that iron play that he's going to possess. And, you know, it comes down at the end of the day that you kind of have to trust your numbers. And specifically with him, like the same thing happens around the green, 35th in strokes gained around the green. But if you want to look at slow green complexes, Bermuda green complexes, weighted around the green, when you add all that together, he's a steady uptick for me in a lot of those areas. Haven't necessarily gotten that historically at this course. And, you know, I would make an argument that names like Bradley, Batia, Henley, wait a week at the Sony Open, and that's going to probably be the spot where they're most likely to pop. But, you know, the same thing is going to occur here. If Bradley shows you anything and he's in the Sony Open next week, you're going to have to pay the price for it. And I do think he's a little bit too cheap at the end of the day at this price tag that he's at.
Yeah, look, I think Keegan Bradley's really interesting. He's got a good record at Riviera. He's got a second and a fourth year previously. And at this course, particularly back in, some 10 odd years ago, showed success in his first two instances playing here, including a fourth. Decent enough record of the Masters, has never missed a cut, I believe, or he's missed one cut across his career, never really popped at Augusta National beyond that. Look, I think a really interesting name, fifth recently in the Bahamas at the Hero World Challenge, another tropical kind of birdie first golf course, similar kind of metrics to what we see here. I don't think he's going to necessarily be overly popular as well. So again, could be very, very sneaky, could possess a lot of upside. And this is his Ryder Cup year, right? Like he's going to be leading Team USA this season and may want to come out here at the start of the season and really put a marker out there. So interesting name again from you there, Spencer. I'm going to go and take my next two. I mean, if we're looking at just pure upside of a golfer can go absolutely bananas and score you a -8, a -9 on any golf course, Sepp Straka just immediately comes to mind. I think there's a few other reasons to look at him as well. He's played here twice. He's finished 21st and 12th in two instances. He's made the cut all three instances. He's played at Augusta National, including his 16th, and showing constant improvement around there as well. And then obviously 9th recently at the Hero World Challenge, playing the Bahamas. So I like that he's played that tournament fairly recently. 3 weeks ago, was playing competitive golf in a decently strong field. I just know that Sepp Straka has the ability at any day to go out and just absolutely go berserk, and seems, of course, that he can certainly go and do that here. I know that last year that he was within my selections when he finished 12th and played very, very well, other than one round of 70. All his rounds was 67 or better at this golf course. So he's definitely found success here previously as well. The other name then, I'll go and jump right up back to the other end of the board at the top, back in the 9K range. I'm going to take Liv Vergoberg, who's played the Augusta National once and finished runner-up earlier this year, still 2024, believe it or not. This is one of the top 5 golfers in the world, like undoubtedly. Yes, he's had some concerns recently with his injuries, but 6 at the Hero World Challenge on return was enough to kind of dispel some of those fears for me. I think that he's well justified at the price. I think this is the type of golf course that he's really going to play well at. Good with his wedges as well, and obviously tons of distance with the driver, but also very, very accurate as well, which I think is a deadly mix when it comes to this golf course. So Spence, you are back on the clock. Your thoughts, please, on Straka and Aberg, and then we'll hear your 5th selection.
When you dip into the $6,000 range, you're always trying to find qualities and traits that provide the ability to move yourself up the leaderboard. And we have seen it historically from Straka: iron play and the ability to sometimes get extremely hot on slow greens. These are the two qualities that come into play. There's a boom or bust nature to him. he's liable to go in any direction, in my opinion, on any day. But of $6,000 golfers, I'm also not looking in a GPP contest to play things safe. I'm always trying to shoot for more upside, for the ability to move yourself up the leaderboard. Ownership comes in to account always on it. But there are a lot of names in that $6,000 section that when you compare ownership and their rather flat nature of safety, like they're going to be what they are, but they're not going to necessarily provide a whole bunch if they actually do pop. I think Straka is the reverse of that answer, to where you're going to have some boom or bust nature to him, but when he does put the pieces together, there's the ability for him to top 5 this tournament, and that's kind of what you're looking for. So I think Straka can be sneaky this week. I think he's a name that you should definitely at least consider. There's a couple different ways that I can round out my build here, in my opinion. Like, there's the flat route of the Siwoo Kims, the Davis Thompsons, the Russell Henleys. I kind of like Robert McIntyre this week. There's a lot of names that fit Ben on. There's a lot of names to consider. I'm going to go a different route, though, just because I do feel like there are a handful of golfers down in that $6,000 section. If I go a little bit more extreme at the top, that I am fine taking a few shots here and just hope that the pieces fall where they should. You know, we want to talk about course history, David, and there's a lot of names that we have mentioned over and over again, of the Morikawas and the Thomases and all these names that have been very steady at this course. In a lot of ways, both of those two options I would prefer to have gotten to than the name I'm going to take. But with those two options off the board, I'm going to take Sung Jae Im at 9,500, a golfer that's been inside of the top 13 all 4 years of the last 4 years of playing it. I also thought he closed 2024 in a much better fashion than what we got from him throughout durations of that season. We know that the wheels fell off for him at some point, and then they slowly started to come back together. But, you know, when the statistics meet and fit the narrative of why a golfer has found success, I am always more willing to buy into the course history narrative for that answer. My issue comes into play is when the answers and the statistics don't match why that's happening. And a lot of times it's because of these random nuance factors. Sung Jae is very sound across the board. As I said, like, there's not that many golfers in the $9,000 section for me that I thought had value on the very surface of it. Every single one of them, other than Sung Jae, has already been drafted on the board right now. So I'm going to go with Sung Jae Im. There's a couple golfers at the bottom that I'm fine rounding this out with. But even with the way that I built this, David, like, I think that's perfectly acceptable to go the Henley and player X route with it. It's just kind of like I've said, Henley at the Sony Open next week is more of where I'm kind of looking to deploy him.
Yeah, we know Henley's history on that golf course. We had him last year at that tournament. He finished 4th in the end after a subpar final round, but certainly should have gone out and won the tournament, really. He was easily a favourite with sort of 6 holes to go before getting swamped at the end of that event. But yeah, look, good history in Hawaii for him. But even better history for Sung Jae Im at this golf course. He was within our selections last year, along with Sahith Theegala. We were a little bit robbed, I felt, going into that final round. We really had a very, very good chance of grabbing the winner. I thought Theegala in particular was a really interesting name. But Sung Jae Im, as you said, I think that he had a better end to 2024 in the main season than a lot of people give him credit for. He really did start to turn around when it got towards the end of the year. He ended up finishing 11th at the BMW, 7th at the Tour Championship. He was 13th at the Zozo, and then 9th at the Hero World Challenge. I don't think the Zozo is the worst comp that you could look at in terms of the players who have played well there and then played at Augusta National. If you're following that link between those golf courses, at Accordia, Tiger Woods won that tournament before winning the Masters the following year. Hideki Matsuyama had won at that event as well before winning the Masters. So some good correlations there, and it was a nice tournament for him to go out and perform at. And then at this golf course, I mean, as you said, he finished worse than 13th, and 3 of those finishes have been 8th or better. He's been 2nd at the Masters on debut, as well as an 8th and a 16th since. So Sung Jae Im last year was one of my favorite names to maybe come out and perform well at Augusta. Because it didn't pan out that way, but he did play very, very well for us last year at Plantation. And I think you've got every reason to believe that he might do so again this year as well. Audience, you are on the clock. It looks like after me pumping Sahith Theegala's tires, you guys have gone and selected him, which is absolutely fair enough. I love Thigala this week. I think that he is an excellent opportunity to find some value, definite upside. I think that he's a much improved golfer over the last 12 to 18 months than a lot of people giving him credit for. He's got huge upside for sure. Definitely an interesting name and one that will be in a lot of my DFS lineups, that's for sure. So finished second here last year. He was the first round leader here last year as well. Make sure you stick around to the end of this show when we'll give out first round leader bets for free. And while we're waiting for the audience, it probably pains to mention that our Black Friday sale over at Win Daily Sports was so popular that we've brought it back for a limited time. It will be finishing soon, but under that offer, which is down in the description below, just click on the join link, enter the promo code Black Friday. You'll get your first week for just $1.99, and then you'll get 50% off your monthly membership ongoing as well. So that's just $25 a month or 80 cents a day to have all access to not just all of our golf content, another profitable season for us over at Win Daily, 3 years in a row that we've made excellent profit off our golf tips, but you get all the NHL, NFL. I hear that there's this thing called the Super Bowl coming up. You might want to get some selections in. I've heard it's a big deal for you guys. I'm not too sure. NBA, MLB, all the sports that you want, as well as obviously our golf coverage for 80 cents a day is an absolute bargain. It's by far the best value in the market. So Zach's calling a deadlock, Spence. So I'm going to hand this selection over to you. You've got Aaron Wright, Nicholas Echeverria, Nick Dunlap, Siwoo Kim from Sorrento, Harry Hall. I think that's all the selections you've got. So who would you like to draw from that pack to select for the audience?
I mean, they're all very similar in my model. Like, I don't have a massive take one way or another. I don't mind deferring it to you if you have an actual take here, whether that is a real answer to try to help the audience out or the reverse of that. But I mean, they're all in the same ballpark for me.
Well, I think the audience can't afford Nick Dunlap, can they? Because that would probably be the name that I'll go to, but he's 7,200. They've only got 6,900 left. We've got a Joan has gone Harry Hall again. She really likes Harry Hall. Let's just give it to Joan. Joan, you can take Harry Hall. Look, I do like the Harry Hall selection. I think he's quietly quite sneaky. He's a really good putter. He's good around the greens. He's played well at tropical courses previously. Last time we saw him was in Mexico. He finished 14th there on another birdie fest golf course. And look, I think he has the upside as well as the approach metrics. If you look at the 50 to 100 yard metric, that is one where Harry Hall does tend to outperform his usual approach metrics as well. He tends to do better the closer into the green that you get. With that short game, I think Harry Hall definitely has the ability to go and spike. So nominate him for team audience, and Spence will go to you for your final selection of the first draft cast of 2025.
So this answer I'm about to give for Harry Hall. I just want to note that this is not weighted by the strength of the field. These are weaker tournaments that Harry Hall is playing. So take this at face value. There's a lot to like about Harry Hall this week, though, when you just look at some of the returns. He's number one in my model at strokes gained total when you put him on an easy course. He's inside of the top 10 when you take distance proximity under 100 yards and around the green. He climbs inside of the top 10 for me in almost all of the weighted scoring categories of what I'm looking for. That includes being the number one expected weighted par 5 scorer. A lot of this is coming against weaker competition. There are negative traits that you can pinpoint towards that, but it goes back to the sentiment that I talked about very early on, is when you are in the $6,000 range, you are trying to find a specific blueprint that you believe in, and you are then trying to bet on that upside. Harry Hall on weak, easy golf courses has historically found his best success. You talked about tropical courses. All of that ends up fitting the narrative there. So I do think of those choices, Hall is probably the route that makes the most sense. My model loved him, like to the point where I was very concerned about the returns, and I had to go in and I did some back testing on it. And when I weighted it a little bit more for the strength of field, he did drop in my sheet. But when I'm looking here at my $7,100 price that I have, there were essentially three golfers to me, and I will include Harry Hall into the mix here just for the sake of this conversation here, that I was very interested to try to have a discussion for. I mean, maybe you could go to the Denny McCarthy route. We want to talk about a spike putter. He presents that nature. But More so, it was Eric Cole, Steven Yeager, Harry Hall. Kind of fine going in either of those three directions there. Cole, we always get this cheap price tag with him. I don't, at some point, the market is going to have to correct itself. I understand he doesn't necessarily provide the win equity that everybody wants to see, but how many times can we price the guy in the $6,000 range and he goes off and finishes in 14th place or whatever the number ends up being? I think there's a real chance that that's exactly what we get from Eric Cole this week. But, I have built this, David, in a really boomer bust fashion. I think this is a GPP lineup in a no-cut tournament where I'm kind of trying to pick and choose and take all the chances that I can. Level things out a little bit with the Sung Jae Im selection, in my opinion. But I'm going to go to another golfer. If we want to say that Wyndham Clark has been a player that I have been on over and over again, I'm going to go with Steven Yeager one more time. If you want to talk about high-end results that can enter the mix for him, this is a golfer that when he puts the pieces together, he does it in a fashion that works up the leaderboard. When it goes reverse, they're missed cuts. We don't have the ability to miss a cut this week, but 17th in my model in weighted strokes gained total, 4th in my model when you combine distance, short iron proximity around the green. Any of those birdie metrics look very great for him, not necessarily to the same level that we got with Eric Cole. Easy golf courses, Eric Cole, usually the recipe there, but just across the board for me, a very solid top 25 player that for an upside perspective, graded a little bit better than that on this course and graded just inside that top 25, which I know is not going to necessarily like ring the alarms as the greatest play of all time, but I think he will go under the radar. I think he will be a golfer that possesses high upside. And I do think that there's hidden backdoor top 10 potential when you do take Yeager this week.
Yeah, look, I kind of love the way that you've built this lineup. I think this is the ideal way to build a GPP. I mean, all you really need is someone like Wyndham Clark or Sung Jae Im to go out and win this tournament, and you've got so much potential in terms of names to differentiate, provide some leverage on other players in terms of ownership there within your lineup. I think Eric Cole's a really interesting name as well that you mentioned, because Eric Cole gets this hard time for not being long enough off the tee and not really being accurate either. But given that that driver doesn't really play much of a part at this golf course in terms of differentiating yourself from one player to another, I think that Eric Cole's an interesting name in terms of the approach mixes and around the green game and the putting, where the way to differentiate yourself at this golf course really shines through. So I think he's an interesting name there as well. Obviously, I've only got one last pick. I'm going to spend all my salary here with my 6,500, and I'm going to go and take Cam Davis. I think that if we're looking in terms of approach metrics, putting, especially with the approach play, Cam Davis is one of the most interesting names in that 6,500 range. Obviously, he's played twice at the Masters now in the last 3 years. He finished 46 on debut and then came out with probably a surprise for many when he finished 12th at Augusta National earlier this year. He played this tournament and on debut finished 10th back in 2022 as well. So obviously found something to like with this golf course pretty much immediately on his first time of trying. He was pretty indifferent when he played here last year, but in saying that, he did close out with a 65. So we can perhaps put that down to some off-season rust for Cam Davis, but he's actually played a bit on the DP World Tour in between as well, including a 6 down in Australia. So I like the fact that he would have spent some time back in his home motherland in Australia. He's played some golf tournaments professionally as well, and obviously played pretty well in those fields. So Cam Davis for me always got that eagle upside with a player like Cameron Davis. He's going to go and get you birdies, and I think at 6,500, if you're going to take a shot down in that range, not one of the worst names that you can go to. Spence, before we jump into our first round leaders, any thoughts on Cam Davis, and then we'll take the draft board and give some bets out.
So I was looking, as you were talking about Cameron Davis, of golfers in my model that when you're looking for similar profiles of a name that has found success here in the past. And one of the big, I guess, let's say two of the big names that make the biggest climbs are Harry Hall and Sepp Straka. We've talked a lot about them, but Cameron Davis does the same exact thing. Yeager would be the other option there, but I know Davis does it in a different way than what everybody actually anticipates of how he does it. But, and maybe you could make an argument here that this is not one of those club down courses to where he necessarily finds that success. But look, this is a golfer, David, that we know at his very best when he puts the pieces together is one of the elite talents in the world. And it doesn't mean that he necessarily finds that this weekend in Hawaii. But for me, this is the boom or bust mentality of what I'm looking for down at the bottom of the board. It's not that safe route to where my guy's going to finish in 23rd place and you're really not going to get much from it. At least with Davis, you have the ability at any point that he can put the pieces together with that distance, some of the proximity play. Like there is a lot to look into with him. And I do think from a value perspective, he's a value for me at the price.
Right, exactly. I mean, the fact that you could get an eagle or two out of Cam Davis at any given time, even if he doesn't necessarily get those finishing positions, can boost up your fantasy point output from him immediately. And the interesting thing that I think I take from what you just said in terms of those club down spots where Cam Davis has previously played really well, I think one of the interesting things with him is because he knows that he's got this distance off the tee, he tends to reach for driver a lot, except for those golf courses where he absolutely can't. There's no reason for reaching to driver. He clubs down and he actually tends to play better. And so on a golf course like this, where there isn't actually really that much danger off the tee and he can use that driving distance to his advantage, I think that's a really interesting spot to deploy him, where he is going to be reaching for driver for sure, but he's not necessarily going to get into all that much trouble with it compared to some of the other spots where he might. And the case in point, I guess, is his performance at the Rocket Mortgage as a result of that, where driver does play a huge part, but you're not going to get into too much trouble. It's kind of boom or bust. It's like you're either going to end up in the water or you're going to end up finishing first, which he did obviously very recently at that golf course as well. So I think there's a lot to like there. We'll take the draft board down. We're going to jump into some first round leader selections. As I said, if you haven't already, go and click that link in the description, sign up to win daily. You get all of our ownership projections. We'll get all of our bets as well. We finished another year in profit in 2024. If you use just $10 per unit on my selections for all of our golf tournaments in 2024, you would have made over $3,600 that easy. And that's coming off a year where Scotty Scheffler, since March, won 56% of the tournaments that he started, right? So you think that to end up in profit in a year like that, which was really tricky for a lot of punters, we did pretty well. So that Black Friday deal has been renewed just for a few more days. So jump into the description, use Black Friday, 1 week for $1.99, and then it's just 50% off all your monthly memberships from then onwards. As long as you stay a member, you keep that deal, $25 a month. It is absolutely great value. We'll jump into some first round leader bets. I've got 5 to give out. I'm going to start with a player that I actually drafted, which was Justin Thomas. As I mentioned, I couldn't get there in the outright market for Justin Thomas. He was the name I really wanted to see something like 15 to 1, 17 to 1 with 8 places in order for him to make my betting card. He ended up coming in at 10s. But in the first round lead market, you can get him in 19s. And actually, in this field, over the last 20 golf tournaments, Justin Thomas is one of the best performers in terms of his first round leader performance. He's finished second, 7th, and 2nd in the first round his last 3 starts, and obviously a golf course that he absolutely loves. I think that he's turning a corner, and the fact that you can get double his win odds for the first round leader, I think, is great value. Then we're going to go down a bit further to Sungjae Im. I'm getting him at 26s. Look, as Spence said, he's turned a corner towards the end of 2024, and he's got great course history. So 26s, I think, is a very, very generous for Sungjae Im. I'm going to take Sahith Theegala at 31s. So he was the first round leader at this golf course this time last year. Cashed a first round leader for us last year at this event to start the year with an absolute bang. And I'm backing him to do it again. You're getting him at 30s. And in terms of this field over the last 20 rounds, he is the best scorer in the first round. He tends to play very, very well in that first round. So I like him there. Last two, Jason Day, who I took my first selection just to deny Spencer, started the year in controversy. I think he can go out and get a first round lead for you at 40 to 1. And then Sepp Striker, you're getting 60 to 1 on him for a first round lead at the moment. Definitely a golfer who'd come out and shoot -8, -9 and take a first round lead for you. So those are my first 5 selections of the year for first round leader: Justin Thomas, Sungjae Im, Sahith Theegala, Jason Day, and Sepp Striker. Spence, will jump over to you. Have you got any first round leaders this week or any matchups that you want to give out?
I don't have anything at the second, but I do want to double down a little bit on what you just talked about. And I think Justin Thomas in that 18 to 19 to 1 range is a very intriguing number to look into. You kind of get what you were hoping to be at a little bit more so in that market. And I just ran my model right now because I was curious. And all I did was just look at easy golf courses over the first round. What are the golfers over the last X amount of rounds that have performed the best? Number 1 was Patrick Cantlay. Number 2 was Justin Thomas. Number 3 was Jason Day. Like, I mean, those are two of the names there, and there's a lot to like about those options. And Cantlay is the one name that we didn't talk about a lot on this show. To me, Cantlay is another one of those. He's high priced. I don't know where the ownership's going to come in. He's a little bit boom or bust, but if you put that ownership low enough, there is a reason to consider him, in my opinion. You can see what the betting market has already done on him so far this week. He has been a steady mover throughout the space in a way that would be going against, if you were where you would want it to be, like it's moving against you. So that's usually an indicator that there's at least some amount of money on him that is sharp. And I mean, at the bare minimum of it, even if you don't trust him over 4 days, there's that first round narrative that comes into play there. So just as a statistical standpoint, those are the top three names there. I would make an argument that I do think Adam Scott still makes some sense. There's Russell Henley, Davis Thompson. There's a lot of different names to consider, dive into it a little bit more throughout the week. But I think just giving that information to everybody on my end after you eloquently went through all your selections kind of just adds a little bit more of doubling down on your plays. And also let's just talk about why the data says what it does.
Yeah, I thought Patrick Cantlay is a really interesting name. I'm surprised he wasn't drafted in this tournament. I mean, the guy hasn't finished worse than 25th since June of this year. I know that he hasn't had necessarily the wins that you would have wanted from him, but he has got a good record at this golf course as well. He's not finished worse than 16th here. Spoiler alert, he did make my outright betting card at the number that was available because I felt that he had tons of win equity at the event, even though he hasn't got over the line in the last couple of years. I think this is a golf course that really suits him, and the recent form has actually been a lot better, I think, than people are giving him credit for. He arrives at a golf course he's played one. He's kind of started to unlock Augusta National a little bit as well. He started playing better, and given his real performance in the majors in general, the fact that he started to perform better at Augusta National, I think gives me a bit more confidence going into this tournament, a course that he has found success before as well. So look, just another reason Spence will be dropping into the pick sheet that we put out every week and the article over on Win Daily. So once again, make sure you jump in, grab that deal before it ends. It'll be one of the best deals for sure that you can get in 2025 in terms of value for all of your DFS content, all of your betting content. Spence, as always, it's been a pleasure. Have a very good New Year tomorrow. I'm sure Las Vegas will be a fabulous place in New Year's, as it is all year. One of my favorite places in the world. What are your plans going into New Year's Day?
I'm probably going to keep it easy. That's not necessarily the answer. That's a lot of fun necessarily to talk about on a show. But, just had a birthday about 2 weeks ago now at this point. And with old age comes a little bit earlier sleep with it. I will say, I see a lot of people talking about the hat this week. This is a Desert N hat vintage from the 90s. So, representing with the flowers of Hawaii, always try to theme it towards the show. But, everybody out there, have a good, safe New Year's. Let's have a good season this year for DFS and look forward to getting things rocking and rolling again.
Absolutely. For the record, love the hat, love the theming, always bringing the style points. I definitely think so. I'll reiterate what you said. Merry Christmas to everyone. I know that Christmas has been and gone, but I hope that you had a good one. I hope that you have an better new year. I hope that 2025 brings us a lot more prosperity again in terms of DFS and betting. And of course, as always, sports.